Okay. Hopefully we won't have that feedback issue. Good evening and welcome to NAACP Unmuted. I have the privilege of serving as the president of the NAACP Fort Lauderdale Broward branch. We'd like to take an opportunity to thank everyone for joining us on this most important issue. As many of you know, that NAACP certainly focuses on education. It's one of the cornerstones of the work that we do within the association. And so wanted to take this opportunity to have key figures who have helped us and who will continue to help us as we navigate the space of education, particularly here in Broward County. Bridget, our Minister Edwards, who is our Religious Affairs Chair, and she is Assistant Pastor at New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, was unable to join us. Normally, Judge Holmes would fill in, but she has had a procedure that is not going to allow her. So we are asking, as I often do, the Reverend Dr. Rosalind Osgood to open us up with prayer, because we are going to do this as we do with NAACP, begin and end with prayer. If you will, Dr. Osgood.
Thank you, Madam President. Let us pray. Eternal God, our Maker, our Creator, we thank you for another day and how you brought us into another year. We pray that you will bless our community to stand peace and liberation for all people. Allow us to be peacemakers, fact tellers, and allow us to be steadfast and unmovable and given to our hands. Continue to shine your grace and your mercy upon the NAACP. And bless us all, God. Tonight we pray and we ask you, Lord, have mercy. And Lord, we thank you. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Dr. Osgood. So we have on, you'll see many of our executive committee members as well. The NAACP has had a long history here in Broward. I am no exception to make sure that we are fighting for all of the kids, and particularly kids who look like me, to make sure that they have a high quality education. I also serve as our Legislative Affairs Chair for the NAACP Florida State Conference. In addition to being the president here, we want to make sure that we are able to be about the business. I don't have to tell anyone here that it has been a circus with our school board and the back and forth. And so we're going to start with Dr. Osgood. I know people are going to say, well, she's no longer the chair, and as they have, but you serve on some very important committees that are going to help us. We work with our state senators, our state reps, and all the time, and we need them to make sure that our children are not forgotten and that policies work for all of our children. And so I would, if you would share with us, Dr. Osgood, Senator Osgood, the committees that you share on and your function that you will perform and have already begun as committee week when it comes to your capacity as senator, our senator here in Broward.
Thank you again, Madam President. I'll start out by saying, as a mom and community advocate, I'm going to always be an advocate for kids. As a proud resident of Broward County, I'm going to always support and be involved in schools, just like I was before I was on the school board. I am serving you this year in the Florida Senate as the vice chair of the Community Affairs Committee, which will deal with a lot of the housing issues. I'm also serving on the pre-K to 12 committee, which is one of the major education committees. I'm also serving on the Health and Human Services Appropriation Committee, which deals with a lot of the mental health and support services that we need in our schools for our children as well as for the elderly. And I'm also serving on the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee and about 4 other committees. I haven't memorized them all yet, but those are the ones that have met so far. I'm actually driving home from Tallahassee, but I'm riding home from Tallahassee. I'm not driving. And it is a privilege and an honor to represent the 560,000 people that make up District 5. And as you've heard me say for many years, I'm committed to the acronym change. Children have a need to grow every day. And I believe that it's important that all of us as adults commit ourselves, our behavior, our resources, our talents to helping our kids grow every day. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you just, so on your committees and for education, how does that relate to us and how you're able to continue to serve us in your capacity as senator? What does that really mean?
Certainly. So in my thought process of leaving the school, a part of the frustration you encounter as a school board member is that the state legislator, the senators, and the make rules and policies and give them to the school board to implement. Most of the things that govern schools, the policies, the mandates, they come from the state level. Then school board members have to implement subsequent policies to implement those things. I'll give you a clear example that all of us will be able to relate to. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened. It was horrific and horrible, something you don't ever want to live through as a family member or school board member. The legislator got together and said, we're going to put an armed officer in every single school. And it was passed down to the school board. Well, nobody checked to see that there was literally not enough armed police officers in the entire state to have one in each school. So school board members then had to get creative and use things like guardians or retired officers or retired military people. But again, it was a policy that was put in place on the state. Another one is the state has been very diligent in raising the salaries of starting teachers, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But a starting teacher should not come into a district making the same pay as somebody who served the district for 18 years. So when that happens on the state level and you're on the local level, it creates a lot of problems within your staff. It goes morale, and there's nothing you can do about it because it's a policy that's set on the state. So with my experience in representing you on the school board, I'm able to serve on the education committee in the state and actually speak to the implementation of things that they're talking about doing or implementing. It's one thing to sit and make policy, but the policy can't be effective and sometimes does not achieve the intended goal because you can't implement it. And this was one of the things that actually led me to run for office from the very beginning, as I was teaching public policy evaluation at Nova. And one of my students did research on the 1996 Personal Responsibility Act, what we know is going from welfare to work. And that act came into play and it pushed many people off welfare, but it pushed them into low wage paying jobs where they went from welfare and getting support and help to a low paying job where they were now the working poor without the additional support. It was a bad policy. The implementation met the goal that it got people off of welfare, but it actually increased poverty and made things harder for hardworking people that had multiple kids.
Thank you. And so, Dr. Holness, you ran in a crowded field. You were successful.
Yes.
However, you've had during the course of the election, you had a number of your opponents, your former opponents, that talked about District 5 being the worst, that we were the worst funded, had the worst leadership. We were just, neglected and so on and so forth. So tell us about your experience in District 5 as you, understanding that you've been there a short time, but I know that you hit the ground running. So tell us what has been your experience with District 5 and what you've learned that you didn't know when you were as a candidate.
Right. Well, thank you, Madam President Ellison. What I started doing is to visit the schools, because I believe by visiting the schools, I can get a hands-on experience as to the challenges each of the schools in District 5 is having. So initially what we're doing now is we're visiting schools with high population of ESC students in District 5, and how we can look at their challenges in order to come up with ideas to effectively address the needs of specifically the ESC students. We're also going to move beyond that and visit schools as well with other challenges. So I visited Horizon Elementary. I've also, and we've learned a lot about the concerns that's there, because they have over 30% ESC students. Part of the challenges they have is how to meet the needs of the ESC students and actually have the required amount of resources to do so, in terms of not just material resources, but in terms of staffing. And so we're looking into how we can address that as well without having those ESC specialists and staff overworked. I also visited Mirror Lake Elementary, which also has over 30% ESC students. We're looking now in January to visit Larkdale in Fort Lauderdale, because they too have a high population of ESC students. So that's one of the focus. But Madam President Ellison, if you look at my top priorities, ESC students was one of the focus. The other focus was closing learning gaps. So we're going to look at schools with significant learning gaps when we compare our students, such as when we compare our Hispanic and white students, or Black and white students, Black and Hispanics, and how we can close those learning gaps in District 5. And I do have, for example, if you look at the data for the FAST math exam, the learning gap for Black and white students in the district for grades 6 through 8 is approximately 22%. And for grades 3 through 5, it's 15%. And for Hispanic and white students, the learning gap for grades 6 through 8 is 10%. And for grades 3 through 5, it's 9.6. So we have to look at ways in which we can address these learning gaps. And that's going to be another part of my school tour and visit, to really see and get to the bottom of these issues, and to see what we can do as a district to close these learning gaps as well.
Thank you. And let's just get right to it. So the agenda item to rescind the dismissal of Superintendent Cartwright.
Yes.
Tell us your reasoning behind that. I mean, as such as, were you just such an advocate? This wasn't, I mean, you being an advocate for Dr. Cartwright, is this like what was the reasoning behind your being the one to put that item on the agenda?
Right. Well, I appreciate that question, Madam President Ellison. During the course of running for office and prior to that, I have not met or had a conversation with Dr. Cartwright. I really don't know Dr. Cartwright in any way prior to actually being elected. So this was not really so much about the superintendent. When I observed what occurred, this was about following the right procedure and protocol. And I've heard this from multiple people as well. I believe it's important that we protect the image of the school board and that we follow procedurally the way in which things should be done. Now, if you look at the way the superintendent was terminated, and it could be Dr. Cartwright, it could be any superintendent. The way in which it was done, I mentioned that it was not in the spirit of the Sunshine Law, and it certainly seemed as if it was a violation of our policy 1100A, because if you look at policy 1100A for the school district, when you look at item on that policy under item 4C and D. Item 4 says school board member will set these 7 items as B or BB items on the agenda by providing a copy to the superintendent or designee for placement on the agenda. And then it says for school board items addressed in subsection B and C above, these items inclusive of attachment shall be brought at least 7 days in advance for the purpose of proper notice. Now, the item to the motion to terminate the superintendent was somehow linked to an audit item, and the motion was in itself was not an item placed on the agenda as a BP item. So the public was also not given the proper notice to speak on that item. So in my as far as observing all what has happened procedurally, I think it was a violation of policy 1100A for our school board policy, and I think it was certainly not aligned with the intent of the Sunshine Law. And that is why I moved to reinstate the superintendent. I am not an advocate for the superintendent. This wasn't about the superintendent. This was about procedurally what we did. And so I think that we needed to reverse that and follow procedures so we can maintain the image of the office. And so I also indicated that it was decided upon to have the superintendent given 3 months to evaluate the superintendent on certain points. And I believe that should have been granted. Because if we as a board say this is what we're going to request of our superintendent, and then we suddenly change and said no, and then not follow policy and procedures, I just don't think that's the direction we want to go as a board. And I tried to correct that. So I want to make it clear on the record that it really wasn't about the superintendent. It really was about procedurally what we do. And I want to ensure that when I move forward, that I'm proceeding in an ethical and moral manner that follows protocol and procedures, because I think that's what I'm elected to do.
Yeah, I must admit that it concerned me that decision was made by the board to give 90 days, and then some, I think the Sun Sentinel quoted some 20 days later that, that you all changed your mind. I think it's going to affect the next person who applies to be superintendent of schools. I had many conversations, you don't know this, but with Dr. Osgood, the school board member. And one of the things that we agreed upon, and I thought that was very poignant that she said was, I'm sure that there were many more qualified people in who could serve as our superintendent, but they didn't apply. And so they had to go with what they had. And so that's my first piece. And then the second was, I think the decision should be made by the folk that we're elected by the people, not by the appointees of Governor DeSantis, who seems to really have an issue with Broward County. So once the people vote, get our own representatives, I personally think that is who should make the decision. Now, whether she stays or whatever, that'll be up to the board. We can advocate for, whatever once that happens. So I certainly agree with that. But it's I know that you've taken the beating in the media for that as well, but I just wanted to make it clear that we were on the same page as well, that it wasn't about Dr. Cartwright, it was about the process.
Correct. And Madam President Ellison, we have to understand when we don't follow the guidelines and the process that we put in place, there are others looking at us, and it's going to be very difficult for us in the future if we continue like this to be able to attract qualified candidates to our district. So I am looking at the long-term effect that something like this can have on Broward County schools. So it's a much bigger picture for me. It's really not about the superintendent.
Thank you. And I don't know, so how do you then, Senator Osgood, advocate for us, for Broward, if we are just in such disarray here? Are you able to do that? And does it make it more difficult? I think she may be frozen there.
So
Okay, good.
I'll respond first, and I'm going to be just very transparent. A school board job is a very difficult job. It is a job that's not oftentimes respected. You deal with education, you deal with staff, and then oftentimes in our community, you deal with people that fight you, that choose not to work with you and understand. It's some wonderful people that show up at the school board meeting every day with great information, but they don't have interpersonal skills in the way that they deal with you. So you kind of start getting beat up on every front. So it's only the fact that you know that it's the calling, the work that you're doing. You remember those people, all of those people that trust you with their vote. So you show up and do that. Right now, when the school board is going out to hire a superintendent, it's going to be challenging. I know from experience when we hired, because we noticed in media with the whole politicizing of education now, everybody's afraid to come work here. Nobody wants to work here. With current policy passed in the last legislative session to put teachers back against the wall, the Don't Say Gay bill, the fictitious critical race theory bill, teachers are quitting. They're leaving wonderful people that have committed their life to education. They're out because they don't want to take a chance on saying something in the school and being arrested. So as a community, we're going to have to work together and think about some strategies and ways. We think about advocating and learning gaps. The biggest problem is always reading. We don't start our kids at home early enough. We don't get them into school early enough. We don't push reading. But the fight will continue because I personally will continue to build organizations like the NAACP, other groups like women voters. You have educational groups, people that really concern, that sometimes push you by listening and trying to work to move for our children. But if you don't have a leader and you don't have human capital in place, you don't have the vessels and the vehicles to even make education possible. And when we think about this whole thing with Dr. Cartwright, I'm sure board members have done very little to address academics and businesses and, Black business efforts with the school board, because everything is being politicized. Every meeting, all the time is being spent on this issue about the superintendent. And I do agree with Mr. Holness that this board that's elected by the people should determine who the superintendent is. A board has that right because they have to work with that superintendent. That superintendent works for them. It doesn't so that people to have their best interests should be able to evaluate, interact with that superintendent, and if it's a decision, come back and address it. Marcia, I supported Mr. Runcie. I took many hits for it. I'm still taking hits for it. But when I looked at the data in District 5, where Jeff is talking about learning gaps now, I remember when I first got elected, some schools had like a 3%, only 3% of the kids that were on reading level. And I think we moved it to like 20 or 25%. But Mr. Runcie helped turn around 5 schools. He came up to give us transitioning Arthur Ashe into a technical school where a lot of people in our community go there and get technical training. They don't have to take buses out to Davie to get it. When I got elected, the overall district graduation rate was like 63%. It went up to like 84% with Mr. Runcie when you include charter schools. If you remove the charter schools out and just do the traditional schools, it's at like 90-something%. I saw increases in graduation rates at Board, Anderson, Dillard. All these are facts. All of these are things that was academically done. And that's why I strongly supported Mr. Runcie. I saw people getting promoted, getting opportunities, especially Black women. So those was my reasons for supporting Mr. Runcie. No, I didn't agree with 100% of the things me and Mr. Runcie did. We would have some tough meetings one-on-one when we met. But when I'm on the dais, I'm going to deal with the agenda and I'm going to carry myself in a professional way. There's nobody that you're going to agree with 100% of the time, but you have to be able to have a balance and look at a complete picture and see where someone is delivering and then posture yourself to help. When I was served on the school board, and even as a senator now, even if I'm not in elected office, I see my role as a community person to help our kids, to help our school district move forward in the best possible way that I can help, whether I'm elected or whether I'm volunteering as a mentor, whether I'm, supporting, having my church adopting and supporting teachers at a school with resources. And these are things that we're going to have to go back to as a community, that we all make a personal commitment to get involved with kids and help children, not the adult problems that we have because we don't like somebody, or somebody run against somebody, or somebody don't do something what we say, and then we just want to attack them. That's not going to move our district forward. It's about focusing on those babies. And we all got babies in the school system that we love, whether they're our kids, our grandkids, our neighbors, our kids in our church. But this is the real conversation that we have to have and be committed to the children and have that supersede our dislikes with each other or things that we disagree about with each other.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Holness.
And Madam President Ellison, I certainly agree with Dr. Osgood on all those areas. And I just wanted to add to the prior conversation, that any change that's offered to the agenda that does not meet the 7-day guideline for the school board should be accepted only for good cause. The motion to terminate was made without cause, and that can leave us susceptible to potential charges and lawsuits. I could not, in my clear conscience, put our district in that position. I believe as an elected official, I believe that the people elect me to be able to trust that I will follow guidelines, I will follow procedures, and I will have the interests of our district at heart. And if there is an action that we must take, that we will do it in a way that does not put the district in a position where it can be consequential for the district. So all of that, and I believe as well that we should treat everyone in a dignified manner, even when we think they're not doing a good job, if that's our opinion. But we must treat people with a certain level of dignity. And we must be we must adhere to procedures, and we must follow those protocols whenever we're making any decision. So all of that I looked into, and I've thought deeply about my decision before I actually put that item on the agenda, and everything led back to me doing what I believe is the right thing to do and in the interest of our district. And that's why I made that decision. So I am going to be for the interest of the people who elected me. They can rely on me to proceed in an ethical manner. They can rely on me to proceed in a manner that will follow procedures. Even when we're passionate about an item, we're going to approach that item using proper protocol, proper procedures when we move forward on any item. And that they can absolutely rely on me about.
Dr. Holness, we really have some concerns, and I'll just use an example, David Watkins. Whenever we needed to, we ran across a young person who had dropped out of school, a young person who was trying to figure out how to drop back in, a young person who needed to go to a particular school for a particular reason. We could always go directly to Mr. Watkins, and he could share with all of the programs that were available. We had folk who, quite frankly, did not want to take children, young people who, for example, I'll give you an example. They had the district years ago, didn't start with Mr. Runcie, where kids they would say they would tell the kids to deal, well, you're going to be 19 when you graduate, so you should really go over out, what's 84, go out there and leave our school, because you're just going to drag down our school grade, and you can go out there and you can take double the classes and then come back. And a lot of those kids did do just that. But when it was time to come back, they were not willing to take them back, even though legally they had, but they didn't have an advocate and to do so, unless we reached out to certain people from the district, and Mr. Watkins was one of those people. So I guess who's filling the gap? People like Mr. Watkins, and I use him as a prime example simply because we have kids that are in the juvenile detention center. And if I needed to know something about the kids, the level of education, the options that they had there, we could always count on that. That would be our contact person. The person that was in charge of the county civil citation, the contact person, making sure that the data was entered, that the services were given, was, and it's certainly Mr. Watkins. Now it's somebody we don't even know temporarily, because I don't think that Cartwright has got around with. I mean, who's filling the gap for these? Where is the education piece going to come in? If you're, and I understand everything, everybody's fighting and people doing this, but who is filling the gap for these, for the ESC children as we speak? I know you're moving around. I know that some years ago, Mr. Runcie commissioned a study on services that the district offered for children who had, different types of ESC students who had different types of need, because obviously it says the same. What are the resources that the district, I know you're visiting schools, what are the resources that the district has as we sit today for children who got stuff? Because, all of us got stuff, kids got, who is it that, what resources do you have to offer when you go to Larkdale and these other schools? What is it that the district is prepared to do for these students?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Madam President Ellison. That is certainly a lot of questions within your questions, but I'll tell you this: as far as Mr. Watkins, Jody Washington is now the new David Watkins, as you would say. But I am also looking at getting to know in a much more deeper way our district leadership. For example, I am going to be meeting with the different departments, for example, with Dr. Dole and teaching and learning, with our very own regional director for District 5, which is Mr. Adamson. I plan to meet with his office and to explore to see exactly what their goals are and what they're doing in terms of our district. Also, I've spoken to Ms. Green, who is now the lead person for the district in charge of our ESC. And I've had many conversations with her regarding ESC and things that we can put together. We're looking at specifically ESC, how we can improve the accommodation of ESC students at the classroom level, because although IEPs, which is the individual education plans that are documentation for ESC students, are well written for the most part and by the ESC department of each school and the district, we see that there are many concerns from parents with the actual implementation of these accommodations at the classroom level. So now we have to figure out how we can have a better connect with the ESC departments for the schools, the teachers in terms of their training, their staff development and understanding, accommodating ESC students, and also school leadership and the role that they play as well. So I think the major concern that I've seen from actually my experience is how do we ensure that in an assimilated classroom where students or ESC students are there with our mainstream students, how are they actually being accommodated as it is written in their individual education plan, and how well are our teachers trained to actually provide those accommodations. So that's what we're actually looking at, because like I said before, we've looked at the IEPs and they seem to be well documented. They also involve parental input in those documentations, but we're very concerned about the implementation at the classroom level. And I will continue to have conversations with Ms. Green, which is our ESC district person, to see how we can actually accomplish the goal of ensuring proper implementation at the classroom level, so we can maximize their learning outcome. And we can also reduce parental concerns about how well their ESC students are being accommodated in the classroom.
So I wanted to give Senator Osgood a few minutes at the end. Her message was goggled. If you will take a few minutes and repeat some of your points, Senator Osgood.
Thank you, Marsha, and thank you, Dr. Holness, for your responses and the great job you're doing. I'll just be very brief. As we move forward with education on all levels, we're going to have to make some really tough decisions as adults. And those decisions are going to have to include prioritizing our children in our education system. I'm committed to the acronym CHANGE. Children have a need to grow every day. And we all have to make a commitment to that, whether we are mentoring kids at school, supporting teachers, whether we are working through our church. I see some of the wonderful members of the New Mount Olive Baptist Church on that participates in the Reading Power program that's been reading to students at Walker for the last 12 or 13 years. But this is a community effort. School boards and the individuals that work in the school cannot meet the needs of our students alone. Our students' needs are much greater than just education. There are a lot of supports and wraparound services. We had wonderful people like Mr. David Watkins leading in the district, who's no longer there. Certainly, I'm sure that there's other brilliant people that can come along and help us. But we have to get over this thing. If somebody runs against somebody, they hate them. Or if somebody don't do what somebody wants, they hate them. I can tell you, being an elected official, you take so many punches, and it's so interesting because a lot of these people you've never even had a conversation with, you don't know their gripes. Our children's lives are really on the line. I can tell you in Tallahassee, and I'm going to be very transparent, we're going to have to learn how to work in an environment where we have traditional public school, charter schools, and private schools. So now the question becomes, how do we make all of them work with full resources that they can truly be competitive? Because that's the word that's being used. You want to give parents a choice. Is it really a choice when we're depleting the resources in the traditional public education and giving the resources to the other two? When you take away resources from something, you're actually hindering that. So how do we find monies? How do we lobby our governor, our state legislator that may not be of the same political party? It doesn't matter. Once you elected, I'm the senator for District 33. It doesn't matter what somebody's party affiliation is, what their ethnicity is, their religious belief. I'm their senator now. And I have an obligation and responsibility to represent them. So as we look at the school district, there is a vast number of ways that we can help. And we have to allow this board to try to put the right leader in place that they feel that they can work with and support to get the goals of the strategic plan done. And then that leader is going to have to be able to put the right staff people in place, because the actual staff is the superintendent staff. And we may or may not like some of the people, but we have to allow people to do the job that they were elected, or to do the job that they were hired to do, and find how we can support or we can help that structure in going forward. We have too many little factions and individual groups doing their own thing that's not connected to the overall picture. They're brilliant people that come to the school board meeting and speak. I used to learn a lot from a couple of people, but they just did not know how to get along with people. So I was never able to really build a relationship with them. But I would listen, take notes, and it was very valuable to my experience. So at some point, we have to go back to being a community. I didn't agree with 100% of Mr. Runcie. We would have some really tough meetings behind the scene. But my data in my district, some schools with 3% reading scores, You know, they increased. When I was first on the school board, graduation rate was like 63%. It increased to like 83%. If you take the charter schools out, it was 93%. So I had many academic things, Black women particularly getting advanced jobs in the district. I had many things that I agreed with Mr. Runcie that had never been done in Broward County before, that I was able to support him and celebrate. There were areas that I thought that need improvement. So you have to balance the two. It can't just be because somebody didn't get a job. A lot of people get mad at you in the district because they don't really understand that a school board member can't get them a job and a school board member can't give them a contract. So they want a job without credentials or a contract without procurement process. And then they get mad when you don't give it to them, and they weaponize themselves and come and badger you and badger you and badger you. I couldn't believe when somebody called my attention a few weeks ago, how many times my name was called in the school board meeting. Well, I was there for 10 years. Those people were not down there saying it. Then call me and say what you got to say. You know, I'm going to stand up for who and what I believe in, and I'm never going to stop. But I can tell you on the state level, it is going to be a challenge. And we're going to have to go back to having our church schools, taking responsibility for teaching and training our own kids. That option worked for us. In closing, think about it. We're coming up on Black History. When we went through post-Reconstruction, when a lot of our properties and things were again taken away from us as a people of color, it is during that time that we built Florida Memorial, Florida A&M University. It is that time that we began to take the education of our kids in our hand and build our own schools and institutions. And now 100 years later, many of us are graduates, or many of us have attended those same schools that's made an invaluable difference in our lives. So I think we have to make a higher commitment as a community. The things we disagree about, we gonna disagree. But how can we come together and work together, whether it's me adopting a school, you adopting a school? I have kids that I still mentor. I won't ever stop doing that. But what are we actually doing for the kids and trying to make their lives easier as they're dealing with all of the multiplicity of issues that they're dealing with when it comes to the school system? Because we know, Marsha, education is the game changer. I'm going to be looking to push legislation or work with my colleagues for more technical schools. You know, there are many kids that are not going to go to college. How can we help those kids? Many of our kids need jobs now. You know, a lot of our high school students, they need money now. They need work and employment now. So how do we look at the real issues and try to do something to help it? And like I said earlier, I don't know if you heard this part, the state makes a lot of laws and impose it upon the school board. And when you're a school board member, you just have to implement it. That was one of the reasons I wanted to go to the state, so I can get at the table before some of these laws are made and at least give a realistic perspective of how it's going to negatively or positively impact the school district. Right now, teachers' hands are tied. Parents have always had rights and say so with their kids in schools. That's why they get permission slips and no, it's always been parental rights. But on the other hand, you have something that's called, and I'm drawing a blank on it, but there's a law that when a kid comes into the school, and say if a kid falls in a class and bump his or her head, sometimes the teacher can get sued because once the kid is in the classroom, the teacher is like a quasi-parent. It's like local parentis, it's a law. So now you have all these different laws, classes. Is the teacher responsible for the kid? Do we not trust educators who are expert in the space of education to educate our kids? Or as a parent, my field of study may be something else. That's why I send my kids to school. But now we have all these flip-flop laws coming into play where we're losing teachers, we're losing employees. Nobody's going to sign up to come work in Broward County schools. We went through that before when we had Dr. Cartwright and like four people literally that we had to choose from because, you know, many people just wouldn't apply because they don't want to be attacked. They see the buffoonery that go on in the board meetings and stuff. Nobody wants that for their lives. So a lot of the high credential quality candidates, there's some people right in our neighborhoods here, even perhaps in the school district, but they're not going to jeopardize their future and their reputation by going to the Broward County School Board. They'll go work in Miami or Palm Beach or somewhere else where the culture is very different. So thank you so much, Mr. Holness. Hang in there. you know, continue to build your relationships in the community. I love this community. I'm never going away. I'm going to support you and all the other board members. I don't care what political party they're in. And if I disagree with something, I'm going to call you, and I expect you to do the same thing with me. And me and Madam President, you know, we're tied together at the hip because we really love this community. So thank you again, Madam President, for hearing me tonight. And thank you for your patience that I could get out the car into the house.
I mentioned earlier, Dr. Holness, about Mr. Watkins. Now, whether, and you were not there, and I get that, but a huge hole has been left because we, not just me, but anybody could call and say, I have a kid who, well, no matter what the issue was, and they may have needed to go to, because Broward County has different schools, a lot of different schools for different stuff that a kid may have going on. But just the information that was needed and could be gotten is now lost. This Jody may be a very nice person, but can she tell me all the programs that are happening in the different paths that a kid could get his or her GED? I don't know her. It was mentioned that we finally got a name at our Juvenile Justice Advisory Board, and there was, I don't know, about 25 people on the board who have never heard of her as well. So when we talk about railroading people out of the district, such as a Mr. Watkins, where are we putting back? Where are we, putting back with children? I know you don't know that, but I'm saying it's a problem. I don't know that those children, I don't know who to call to get other than Cartwright, and she'll tell me whatever she does. But it should be, the transparency has to return to the district. Right. The availability, I mean, there's always red tape whenever you do a district and all that. And I would always, when Runcie was there, I would always call him and he would say, okay, tell me the problem. We knew the problem. And then he would assign someone to help that family. I don't know that there are people that are going to help that family, or I could call Dr. Osgood, and I did, to say, this is the issue. We got a homeless family. She said, well, Marcia, there are, 3,218, because she always knows the number of homeless kids that are in the district, or displaced kids, or whatever they call them. And these are the resources, and this is what I got. Where is that now? That you know what I mean? That's when I say help involving the community, and where is our space, and who are the people that are actually doing this, because we don't know them.
Well, I'd love to comment on that as well, Madam President Ellison. Well, certainly, of course, you can always call me about any concerns that you have, but I'd also like to mention that Ms. Veda Hudge, she's the Executive Director of Student Services and Support, and Mr. Watkins was actually under the leadership of Veda Hudge. And now Jody Washington is also under her leadership. So she's a wonderful person. I think that can be a point of contact for some of the concerns that you mentioned here. I intend to also meet with her as well. And you and I can have further conversations to ensure that you have that point person that you can call on, that you can get the information and the actions that you need. But I think Ms. Hudge is certainly a valuable person. And like I said, Mr. Watkins was working under Ms. Hudge. So I think she would be a great resource for you in that concern. But if you don't mind, Madam President Ellison, I'd also like to talk about the strategic plan that Dr. Osgood mentioned, because I think that's an important piece in moving forward as a district. Would I be okay to talk about that a little bit? Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, so Dr. Osgood mentioned the strategic plan, and I'd just like to elaborate on that for the audience and for those who are viewing, because we do have what I consider to be a very good strategic plan for the district moving forward. We did get input from the community. This was obviously from the prior board, but I have researched and make sure I'm up to date on what's happening. So the community did give its input, and when we look at the community input, I believe it was over 15,000 response that we received. And as far as the top three outcomes for grades pre-K through 5, the top three as far as input from the community was reading and writing skills, math skills, and critical thinking skills. That's for pre-K through 5. And the top three for grades 6 through 12 as given input from the community was critical thinking, English language arts skills, and citizenship. So what the district did was use the input from the community, and the community also gave guardrails, which includes safety and security, wellness, equity of resources, and closing achievement gaps. And we use this input from the community as a board and as a district to create our goals and guardrails that is part of our strategic plan. So in terms of the goals that's in our strategic plan, we have goals that would pertain to early literacy proficiency, algebra proficiency, science proficiency, and college and career readiness. Those are the 4 main goal areas that we're looking at. As far as the guardrails, and we developed these from the input we've gotten from the community, it would be safety, equity, school support, accountability, and wellness support. Now, in terms of early literacy proficiency, as a district, we are looking to basically the percentage of grade 3 students who demonstrate grade level proficiency or above will grow from 52% in June 2022 to 65% in 2027. And for algebra proficiency, we're looking at grade 9 will grow from 53% in June 2022 to 63% in 2027. And for science proficiency, we're looking for growth from 47% to 55%. And as far as college and career readiness, we're looking for the percentage of graduates who earn a combination of any 2 of the following, which would include the college credit on AP exams, the IB exams, that we will have a growth from 41% to 51% by 2027. So these are some of the goals that we're looking at. And Madam President Ellison, I think what caught my attention as well was when we look at the guardrails as far as equity, right? So equity, according to the guardrails for equity, the percentage of underrepresented groups that are placed as gifted will increase from 32% to 38% by June 2025. And the percentage of underrepresented groups enrolled and achieving a grade of C or above in high-level courses will increase from 83% to 86%. And lastly, the percentage of students meeting proficiency in ELA at underperforming schools, these are schools with C, D, or F, will increase from 38% to 45%. So we have a lot of very ambitious goals and guardrails in our strategic plan that we're moving forward as a district in 2023 and up to 2027. We have some very, very great goals, and we're working diligently each year to, and each school year to make sure that we are meeting these goals and we are aligning them, our guardrails with our goals. So those are kind of the what we're looking at as far as the strategic plan between now and 2027.
So let me just speak to the Veta Hudge you mentioned. She is a very nice lady.
Yes.
However, she is working in a new job, and anything that, for example, that deals with promise is nothing that you're going to learn in a few months in that space. So she works with us. Judge Holmes chairs our Juvenile Justice Advisory Board. Our board has asked for data. They have questions regarding policy and procedure. And quite frankly, she's not there yet. Nice lady, but not there yet. And so, yes, Mr. Watkins was assigned, all that sort of thing. But I'm just, while she's getting up to speed, and this will take a while. Promise was not created overnight and certainly not understood. And plus, it's changed. And we talk about policy changes that you all do all the time. While she's getting up to speed, where do we go? And quite frankly, I am concerned, and I didn't get that from Ms. Hudge, about her I think she may have concerns about transparency. And I've not spoken to Cartwright because I didn't even know if she was going to be there. So I don't like to waste my time. I want to see if she was going to be there before I actually, go in and sit down and try to have a conversation with her about, some of the different topics there. But in the meantime, I don't, the people that are in the positions now, there's just such a large learning curve that I'm worried about the kids that are being caught up in this whole space. Because everybody that was connected to Promise is out of there. They made Watkins the face of Promise and made him the fall guy. And that was certainly not the right thing to do. I don't think it was Cartwright's idea. I think she acquiesced to the governor and his foolishness is there.
Right.
But who suffers are the children. So yes, I do know her. Don't know Jody. She's probably very nice, but can she do what needs to be done? Having just arrived there, I would venture to say no. And so I'm very concerned about transparency when it comes to all the issues, the school to prison pipeline. What are we really looking at? I know that the civil citations being put into the schools, not a good look for us. It leads, it's the first door to the juvenile justice system. So I would expect that when the data is released, that Broward is returning to its old ways when it comes to the arrest, suspension, and expulsion of particularly Black children in our schools, while we're fighting on who the superintendent is and how she's given those folk everything they wanted. And the children have really suffered in Broward County. So I get that there are a few people that were task assigned to do this and that sort of thing, but we are way behind when it comes to our children. I don't know where we are for advocating. I'm sure that the district, I know you have lobbyists. I don't know that those lobbyists have been given their marching orders and are working with Senator Osgood. So I guess, Senator Osgood, have you heard from them? Are they talking about, I know you're in committee meetings, is there something that they are concerned, the district is concerned that they've said to you that you're gonna be able to assist and develop relationships to get cooperation on? You tell me. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, so there is a legislative agenda, and a lot of the issues that you're speaking about are very accurate. And as the school board is in this transition period, it's kind of what I was speaking to earlier. As a community, those of us that have served in spaces that have knowledge and wisdom, we're going to have to lead in a way that we work with them to share knowledge and historical facts of how things work. And I heard you talk about Mr. Watkins and Promise, and I just want to go on the record and say there was nothing wrong with the Promise program. It is a very great program. It helps a lot of kids. And Mr. Watkins did a wonderful job. Mr. Watkins was like me. He was a Runcie supporter. He supported and worked with Mr. Runcie. And those of us that took that stand, you either got thrown off the school board or you lost your job and you get retaliated against. And we have to just say it the way that it is so that we can be very transparent about it. You can even read a grand jury report that says Runcie friendly board members, because there were other board members that were a part of this process that are still on the board. Then they put things to your name to say that you're incompetent, misappropriated funds, corrupt, all these things. Well, if that was true, they would have found some kind of way to lock you up. And it's very insulting to people that have had to work all of their lives, starting at McDonald's. Mr. Watkins been working all of his life. I've been working all of my life. And then you have people in the community that perpetuate that foolishness. But we have to stay diligent. Just as you're speaking now about these issues of, we can't go back like we were before Mr. Runcie came. That was another reason I supported Mr. Runcie, where Broward was leading the state in arresting kids in school than any other county in the state of Florida. And with the help of the NAACP, your leadership, Madam President, Mr. Runcie, who gave the data in a very transparent way in this community, that turned around. And those are the kinds of things when I talk about prioritizing kids that we have to do. We know that Dr. Holness is new, although he has a wealth of knowledge because he's a former teacher in AP. We have staff people that are new, and those staff people have guidelines within the district that they have to follow. So even some things that they may want to do, they can't do because they've gotten rules from the state that jeopardize their job or might even cause them to end up in jail if they do certain things. So these are the reasons why we have to have these real conversations, and we have to work to advocate to change some of those things and to help those people that are these new people that are in the positions now. Because if it's not them, it's going to be somebody else. So it's still going to be somebody new. So how do we get them up to speed? How do we meet with them? How do we talk to them? You know, when somebody's asking me questions, Mr. Holness, I'm going to answer and share the best I can. I have a very 10 years of things that went well and 10 years of things that didn't go well. As a leader, I'm always able to take an evaluation and say, I didn't do this so well. I should have paid more attention to this. So we should have done this. That's a part of being a great leader. So again, I'm going to go back to impressing it upon the community. All of the Divine Nine, we need your mentoring groups. We need churches connected to schools with people going and reading to kids, supporting teachers. We need the NAACP to start the circle the wagon right now about kids being arrested in school. And we need to lift our voices around those things that are dramatically impacting our children.
I tell you, Dr. Holness, we really need more transparency. I mean, I can only go by my past experience. And so over those 10 years, if there was something that was going on, for example, do you know if the school code of conduct committee is still there? I understand that the superintendent talked about only meeting if there was a necessary change. Is a disciplinary matrix committee meeting? Do they have people from the community that's going to be on there? I was told that the superintendent wanted to go into a different direction from that as well. Those possibly eliminating or for the parents from participating. That's a problem. I don't know that that's so because she and I have not connected. We made appointments and she canceled 3 of them. She did appear before our Juvenile Justice Advisory Board. And so those are my issues. And again, did I press it? No, simply because I did not. If anybody could see she's going to be, at least the initial termination happening. But the community needs to get back into the schools and be able to work along with, and there are roles for people who certainly want to, but how do we do that? And to make sure that all of us are working in the same direction for the kids. If you have some ideas, Dr. Holness, we're all ears.
Right. Well, Madam President Ellison, I do agree, especially when we look at discipline matrix and having the committee in place and having parental input. I think that's absolutely important. I will speak to the necessary individuals, and I will get back to you on that regarding the discipline matrix committee. I haven't heard what you've mentioned in terms of that being eliminated or parental input not being embraced. But I am a strong advocate for parental input. And I believe that the discipline matrix should be an effective document that we use, and that it should, we have to be very careful with it as well, because when I was in the school system as an educator, the concern with the discipline matrix was whether or not there were biases in terms of how discipline was applied to different groups of students and so on. So I think having oversight and having a committee that would sort of look into how discipline is administered to children is really important. So that's an area that I am glad you mentioned it, Madam President, because I did not have that information, but I am certainly going to, I've taken notes here, and I'm certainly going to inquire to see if that's actually true and to see what we can do to keep that committee in place.
And can you tell me, Doc, what's the status of the elimination of school to prison pipeline committee?
Okay, the school to prison pipeline.
Elimination of.
Mhm.
There were a group of stakeholders, including parents and nonprofits, and judges, everybody there at the table, even the union, BTU, talking about ways in which we could help children, because the district had at some point, you could find it any day, or find a family that the kid was suspended, passed along, became somebody else's problem, suspended, expelled. So there was the committee formed,
Right.
law enforcement was on there as well, to deal with bringing in resources to find out what's the genesis of these problems. Now, when all the madness happened, I have not heard or been invited to, and neither do any other members have been involved as well. So is that still a thing? And I know that you're new,
Right.
so I might put that, if you will,
Yes,
consider writing that on your notes to find
yes,
out the status.
absolutely. And I am making note of that to Madam President Ellison, and I will certainly get back to you on that as well.
Marsha, if you let me just jump in, because this makes a point that I was saying earlier about the state. So what the state did with the bill that they titled critical race theory, there's no critical race theory being taught in K through 12 school, but that
Right.
bill eliminated your school climate change departments, which is the department that had been put in place to deal with these types of issues and began to change the culture of the school, where Black kids are not disproportionately impacted with discipline. So that got eliminated under that whole bill that came forth, as well as, equity departments, anything that they were teaching about race. The district had been doing courageous conversations, even down to how you hire people and how people do business with the district. So when these legislations or these pieces of legislations are passed in Tallahassee, it is very important that we as elected officials, and that's what I'm trying to do right now, will continue, explain to our community what they actually look like when they show up in a school district, when they show up in a business, when they show up in the police department. What does this mean for us on the ground floor? And I can tell you, it is going to be an expectation of mine that we have a community presence in Tallahassee. The governor is all of our governor. When I vote in the Senate, the 40 of us, we vote on everything that happens across the state. It can't just be the one or two people that represent you. We have to push our point as a community and let people see us in numbers, that we care about what's happening in Broward County. There's a lot of disadvantages right now, even with committee appointments, when you come from Broward County, but we can't let it stop us. So some of those laws have now tied school boards' hands as to what they can do, what committees and what things they can have, and it's not right. So if we got to redo those committees through another means, where we don't have someone telling us that we can't have a school to prison pipeline committee, maybe it's just a community committee that we do. I don't know, but we got to find our own way to keep these valuable things going so we can continue to watch what's going on and help our kids.
Thank you. I just think it's not enough information coming out, Dr. Holness. That could be the case. If that were the case, it'd be a good idea for someone to say that. If it's not the case, then what's the next step? So I guess it's just the lack of information that's really happening that's causing the community some concern.
Right, and I wanted to mention also, Madam President Ellison, that we do have a workshop coming up in February on the Promise program, and I will certainly bring up the issue regarding the Discipline Matrix Committee at that discussion as well, to see exactly what's happening and where we go from there. And regarding the School to Prison Pipeline Committee, I believe that would fall under Veda Hudge. So I will speak with her as well to see what's going on there.
Okay. Is there a reason why you wouldn't just ask the superintendent, since it's under hers, rather than waiting for the workshop? Because I think going from her direction.
Right, I can meet with her as well. That's not a problem. But I also think that depend on the information I get from the superintendent, that would be a discussion we could have as well at the Promise workshop coming up in February. But I certainly could meet with the superintendent regarding that as well. Yeah.
And just know that when we talk about school discipline, it's more the disciplinary matrix, and this whole continuum is more than just promise. There's
Right.
that promise is just a small piece dealing with a small number of children. All of them are important. We're talking about a few thousand children versus, hundreds of thousands, but that's just a part of it. And so even though people like to say that it's everything, it's not. There are a whole lot of things going on. The district was to bring in resources, and they did, to help children to catch the issue that is causing their issues early, their behavior in the way that they do. And I would like to know if that is indeed still happening. I'm not
Yes.
sure where school discipline is on this new board's agenda and what we're doing about it. I know you're plugging holes, but if we could get more information, I think that would be helpful to everyone.
Certainly. I will get back with you on both of those committees, and I will have a conversation with the superintendent as well regarding that.
All right, and so let's do some closing remarks. Senator Osgood.
Thank you, Madam President, for hosting this forum, and to the community. You will see many of your elected officials move forward with many community forums. I'm having conversations with elected officials about us leveling up and informing the community about what's going on, what's taking place. You will hear from me soon as it relates to committee week. We've had committee week this week, education committee, community affairs committee, agriculture committee. So we're going to do our best to keep you updated. I'm going to ask you also to tune in to on the online channel, Florida in the Sunshine, the online channel that allows you to see the committee meetings, the Senate sessions while they're happening, and those kind of things, so that you can stay connected. We have to build a Broward presence in Tallahassee. We have to advocate more as a community. It can't just be the one or two people that represent us. So I am happy that I was able to join you tonight for this. Mr. Holness, you and all the school board members have my support. I love my community. I'm always going to advocate for my community. I love our children. You will continue to see me in schools with children, supporting them as I am invited as a senator. I'm never, ever going to stop doing that, because that's my heartbeat. I do the same thing in my church. And I want to just continue to encourage us as we start this new year. Let's move forward trying to build better relationships. Some stuff we got to let go of. Yes, somebody might have said something or done something, but our kids are more important. And thank you, Madam President, for your leadership and dealing with the tough issues and tough questions. And we don't always agree, but we work through it and we move forward. And that's what it's about, in building the community. And certainly want to keep Judge Holmes in our prayers, and all of the other community leaders, that continue to join us for this work. And certainly, to Mr. Watkins and his family. We know that Mr. Watkins is a great man, hard worker. He's going to land on his feet, and, we're going to support him in whatever he does in the future as well.
Thank you. And that is a reminder of promise is not the promise that it was. Thanks to the legislature, we were able to fight them off for several years. And that's the importance of being on the education subcommittees and taking this back, because that is why we have promise data in juvenile justice information center their system there, JJIS, which you all know that school incidences don't belong in the hands of DJJ. However, that is why, because of legislation out of Tallahassee, that's why it's so important to make sure that we have that we keep the legislators informed, they keep us informed, and then we continue to work together. That is while the district looks like it looks, because of our state legislators and fighting is hard and not having the numbers and not having people show up. So thank you again, Senator Osgood. Dr. Holness.
Yes, thank you, Madam President Ellison, and thank you everyone for listening, and everyone here online as well. I just want to mention really quick before I close, for those in District 5 who are concerned about Parkway Middle School, because I know that's major as far as the renovation aspect. The $42 million has been approved to move ahead with Parkway Middle School. Demolition has taken place where we spent $3 to $4 million to demolish existing buildings, and the rebuilding effort will now be underway. We're in the planning stage of this, and this should be completed by 2025. Prior to that, we also had spent $7.3 million on Parkway to put in fire alarm sprinkler system, HVAC improvement, replacing windows, external windows, and painting and so on. But now we're moving ahead with spending another $38 million to build wonderful new buildings for Parkway Middle School. So all of this has been approved, and it's great things happening for Parkway, and I am so happy for that. And I will be visiting Parkway soon to speak with the principal and the leadership over there. So just wanted to mention that as well. And I wanted to also invite everyone as we talk about renovation of schools with the SMART bond. I want to invite everyone to attend the Long Range Facilities Town Hall with ACOM. That's coming up next Wednesday, January 11th at 7 p.m. at Plantation High School. And at this meeting, we will be discussing, or they will discuss existing facilities and resources and how it can be adapted to best meet the needs of our students and communities. So this is next Wednesday, January 11th, Plantation High School at 7 p.m. And January 11th is also my birthday, but I will be going to this meeting. I think I have a full birthday. I have a couple other meetings I need to go to. So I'll just enjoy the atmosphere of the birthday while I'm going to all these different meetings. But I want to say that in closing, while focusing on education may seem like tackling academics and so on, we have to also understand that our students experience other influences and factors that impact their learning. And it is essential that as a board that we continue to focus on support services, such as our school social workers, family counseling, foster care, child abuse and neglect, and those experiencing homelessness, violence, substance abuse, and so on. It's important that we look at the holistic development of the child and all of the factors that impact their learning, and not just academics, because at the end of the day, we're trying to create really healthy, holistic individuals who will become adults and become successful. Now, my top priorities, as mentioned, on my school board page, is to close learning gaps that we've seen as a result of the pandemic, and to effectively meet the needs of our ESE students. I'm working very diligently now in that area, and to build strong communities, as well as to improve school safety and address mental health. All of these priorities that I have, they're also aligned with the strategic plan for the district. And I intend to represent you in an ethical and moral way. And I intend to represent you and to be here for the interests of the district. And I thank you so much for tuning in tonight and for supporting me and for electing me to this office. Thank you so much.
And I thank you, certainly, you both, for joining us. I saw something where they said Dr. Holness had a meeting and didn't invite them. This was not Dr. Holness's meeting. This is the NAACP doing what we do. If you didn't get a personal invite, probably because via email or otherwise, it's probably because you're not a member of the NAACP. So I suggest that we'll ask that there's the only thing missing from the struggle is you. Those of you who are not members of the NAACP will ask that you join. It is, if you're a regular member, it comes to 8 cents a day to join the NAACP as a regular annual member. And so we will certainly invite you for a seat at the table. Before we adjourn, I want to bring on Jasmine Shirley. She serves as our health guru, and to talk a little bit. She'll know that we done with COVID, but COVID is really not done with us still. And so it's still a thing. If Jasmine, if you will come on for a few minutes, just tell us where we are on COVID today.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I know I'm here with Sonia Burrows, and I thank her very much. I had some technical issues with my laptop. But yes, you are so dead right, dead on target. COVID is not done with us. It is not over. Everyone needs to understand that the purpose of a virus is to replicate so it can survive, and it changes, be able to do so. We are now with our 6th variant out of the Omicron. Each Omicron has now divided into several different subvariants of the variants. The Omicron 4 and 5, there's now variant 6. That variant is just as transmissible as the others before it. And it can be just as cumbersome with persons who have underlying illnesses as the others did as well. So I urge people to continue to be vigilant with your 3 W's. Wear your masks. Inside a building where there is a crowd of people where you cannot physically distance yourself. Outside, if you're even in fresh air, but in a crowded stadium, like going to the football game down at the Dolphin Stadium, and you are sitting neck and neck next to people, you cannot physically distance. Everybody's yelling and screaming. You have no idea who is still carrying a virus and transmitting it unbeknownst to themselves, because they may not be having any symptoms at that particular point. So wear your masks, watch your distance, and wash your hands. What we also, as many people know, the updated booster, they say the new booster, this updated booster will give you some protection for the Omicron variants that are out there. So we urge people to get their booster. If you have not had your boosters, you need to get a booster. Initially, you will start your initial series of the vaccine and then your booster. Get your booster. Within 2 months, 2 to 3 months of your last booster. And we are moving now into our winter season and our flu season. We do have other respiratory viruses out there in which the symptoms are the same. I feel bad, cough, sneezing, muscle aches, GI problems, you name it. Those are all the same symptoms, fevers, those are loss of taste and smell. All of these respiratory viruses carry these particular symptoms. Until you get tested to see if you are indeed exposed to COVID, it may be the flu. Flu is out there. Have you gotten your flu vaccine? The flu virus is putting more and more people, especially the severely elderly people who have severe conditions. Hospitals now are being overrun again with respiratory symptoms that are bringing people into the hospital with severe illness of flu, of COVID, and of respiratory syncytial virus, which is called RSV. So we are still in the pandemic, but now we're in a triple-demic, if you will, with 3 respiratory viruses that are out there. So it is incumbent upon everyone to do what you need to do to protect yourself and your families and your loved ones. We have just come from a season of traveling. Many people traveled from somewhere and brought COVID or flu to the homes that they came to visit. It is still out there, people. Please be vigilant, educate your family members who are hesitant about getting some protection within their households. And I thank you very much for every opportunity to spread the word. We are not done with COVID. We are just beginning in our flu, and there's another respiratory virus out there, RSV, all with the same symptoms, all taking people to the hospitals, all resulting in some people getting very severely impacted by the disease, and some people are still dying. Thank you very much, Madam President, for the opportunity to express.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. Bear in mind that we will be in person on the fourth Thursday, which is our regular meeting Thursday at the Old Dillard Museum for our branch installation. We will also have as our guest presenter / speaker our own Gordon Weeks Jr. Let me just tell you that we are having some problems in our jails. We are having some problems with police misconduct, with police brutality. We're having some problems. So we need to talk about it, and we need to be about the business of addressing these issues because all is not well. And with that, are there any other announcements? I wanted to, before I asked Senator I'll ask the Reverend Dr. Osgood to close us out in prayer. I wanted to ask a real quick question. Will you all be, ModCo / Mount Olive be continuing your COVID vaccines? If you are, give us a little information about that. And
Yeah, we certainly will. We will have a date. We'll probably shift to the fourth Saturday. That is in partnership with the South Florida Regional Planning Health Council, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Faith in Florida, and New Mount Olive Baptist Church and the Community Education Alliance. We will continue that service for another 6 months. It is a much needed service where individuals can come from 10 to 1 and get free COVID vaccinations, whichever one that they need. We will have them available there, and we'll start back the fourth Saturday in January. So that will be available.
thank you. And with that, all hearts and minds are clear. Reverend Dr. Rosalind Osgood, if you will give us a closing prayer, please.
I will, and I want to address a comment. It's so sad when we have these forums and takeaways are construed where someone is saying that they came to hear a specific, Miss Aretha Wimberly is saying she came to hear a specific correlation between legislation and education services to students. And she didn't hear that as much as blaming the community. I want to be clear, in the education committee meeting this week, we did not discuss bills. Bills have to be in by the end of January. We talked about monies and concepts, so there were no bills discussed. And nobody blamed the community. We are begging, I am begging the community to be more involved in Tallahassee. You can't do what you do as a legislator without the community, as a school board member, without the community, as the president of the NAACP. So I just want to make sure that when we have these forums, and thank you, Ms. Wimberly, for making your comment and giving me the honor of addressing the comment. It's just so important that we don't have those kinds of takeaways. We have to be able to work together. It's all of our responsibility. God, we thank you tonight for this discussion. We thank you for the family of the Broward County community, the diversity. We thank you for each person and what they contribute in their own way. And God, we thank you that we don't always agree, but we all have the common purpose of serving you and serving our kids in mind. And as we move forward, allow us to move forward in a way that we seek to build community through building peace in response to our love for you and our love for our children. We pray that in the days to come, as the political climate gets even more salty, we see more petty politics, that you would keep our hearts and our minds stayed on you, that you will allow us not to participate in the behavior that's oftentimes not replicable by our children, that you would allow us to be true role models to our children and what we do and what we say. We pray for those that have been in this fight a long time, and they may seem like they don't make a difference, but they do. And we pray that you keep them faithful and you keep them moving forward in the direction that they are, sharing information and trying to help the community, even when they're misunderstood. We lift up Judge Holmes and others that are having some health discomforts at this time, and we pray that you bless and you heal their bodies. And God, we pray that you will forever convict our hearts, our minds, and our spirit, that we will continue to open up our mouths use our hands, our feet, and our words to make this world a better place for our children. Thank you, Lord, and Lord, have mercy. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I urge anyone, in addition to Ms. Wembley, who found that we blame the community. I certainly did not, never did that. I actually did just the opposite and wanted more transparency and more understanding, more communication from the district. Never did that, but in any case, I will also add this video on the branch's YouTube page, which is NAACP FDO Broward. And I would ask that you would consider rewatching it so you can figure out what we actually said truthfully and be about the facts. And with that, thank you for joining us. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.